Hey guys, this is Patrick Hall with Fstoppers.com. In today's video, I wanted to dive into a concept that a lot of photographers probably don't really consider when they're doing commercial or real estate work, and that is replacing the sky with a sky that actually makes sense with the photo that you're working with. Now, I know sky replacement for a lot of you is very controversial, and for a lot of photographers, they would say it's not even true photography, but what I'm talking about is commercial photography. I'm talking about those images that you have to take for a client where the sky has to be perfect. Now, this might be for an advertising campaign. This might be for a lot of real estate or architectural photographer where you're just trying to represent the builder or the property in the best light possible, but the day that you go out to do the shoot, it might not be the perfect lighting scenario. It might not be the best time of year. You may get a horrible sky to begin with and you're trying to salvage the shoot without going out there multiple times. So this video is kind of about the theory of sky replacement and how you can take an image that may not have the best sky, insert your own sky into it, and have those look as realistic as possible. So let's dive right into this. Now, this video is sponsored by Luminar AI. Now, I have to say, you can do sky replacements manually, you can use other software, but kind of what Luminar has done over the last year or so is they've made it incredibly easy and removed all the time-consuming elements out of post-production to replace skies. If you're interested, you can go to the link in the description below. You can download a copy of this. There are some new features in version 1.2. They've added some new cameras for Fujifilm XS110, the Nikon Z cameras, Panasonic. There's a bunch of new features as well, but I feel like some of the biggest features are in the sky replacement. There's been some things that I have wanted for the last 6 months that they have now finally added. So I'm going to get into that. Let me go ahead and open up Luminar AI here. And for this video, I wanted to take a bunch of images of the exact same location in different lighting scenarios, whether it be overcast light or stormy weather, maybe it's hard light, and then also different times of the day. So a lot of times if you're a commercial or real estate photographer, you may not have the benefit of shooting at sunrise. You may get to the job site as the sun's rising, maybe as it's already risen and it's kind of late in the day, and you're just trying to knock out as many photos as possible. So I wanted to go through and see if we could pair up some skies from different times of day with the exact same location throughout different times of day. But then I also thought it'd be interesting to see if maybe some of the times of day that you ignore as a photographer might actually produce a pretty cool looking photo. So here is a house right near where I live here in Puerto Rico. I thought this was really cool because you can see El Yunque, which is the rainforest there in the background, those mountains, and then you can kind of see the neighborhood of Palmas del Mar. I think this is just a really simple, straight, one perspective shot of this residence, and I thought it was really pretty. So here you can see I took this, goodness, like a month ago, and I took this at 17th hour, which is what, 5 o'clock? My math right there. You can tell that the sun is setting to the left, and you can tell that it's very soft light. I can tell that it's soft light if I look here at this shadow. You can see it's not super sharp, it's not super dense, and everything is kind of flat and even here. It's a very nice exposure, and this is the first image that I took that kind of made me think this would be a good video idea. Now, the next image that I took was a couple days ago, and this was at almost 10 in the morning. So not super early, but not quite noon. And as you can see, the storm clouds are rolling in. This shot is very overcast. Just a few minutes later, we get even more dramatic skies. You can see here if I zoom in, we really have some rain coming in here on the side. This wouldn't be the best time of day to shoot if you're trying to deliver a really appealing image for a client, but I did want to bring in some stormier looking images just so that we can play along with that. Now, as I go through these, I think it's also really important for all photographers to become very efficient at figuring out where the lighting is and at what time of day something was shot at. So if you're not good at this, I would recommend looking at images and constantly, especially outdoor images, constantly trying to figure out where the sun is and what time of day it is. Now for this shot, if we go over here and zoom in to this little pillar over here far on the left, you can see the shadows now are not being cast to the side, but they're being cast straight down. So that's a pretty good indicator that the sun is right above our frame. You can also see it here. We have the shadow from kind of this entryway being cast straight down. We have a shadowed area here, and then we have hard light kind of out here in the front. So this image was taken at noon. Actually, it was at 12:37. So this is another lighting scenario where, you know, you may think I shouldn't go outside and shoot because the sun's very harsh. Let's keep going through these images real quick before we start replacing the skies. Again, if we zoom in over here, you can see this shadow is being cast to the right, but it is much harder. If I go to the original image here and zoom back in, you can see how much softer it is. The edge of this little, I guess this is a gutter, isn't quite as defined as it is here in this image. So you can tell the sun is definitely setting on the left, but it's much higher in the sky. It's casting the shadows down, and it's creating much harder shadows. We have hard shadows from all the plants here, and you can see these columns right here are casting shadows through that entryway. Now, I actually really love the lighting in this. I feel like it's hard and edgy, but it still lights the scene in a really appealing way. Now, this image is also taken near noon. This is taken at 11:47, but the difference on this day is there's no clouds blocking the sun. So we have really hard, you know, contrasty light with hard shadows, deep shadows, and then really bright highlights. If I compare this shot to this one, where the sun is in the same position, you can tell the lighting is similar, but the shadows aren't quite as dark. In this one, we don't have those clouds, and so we're getting a much harder light. One thing that's interesting about this image, if you go to the bookstore and you ever pick up a book from like The Lone Photographer or any kind of travel books or anything like that, or maybe even postcards, shockingly, you might be surprised to find that a lot of the images are not taken at dawn or dusk, early or late in the day, when us photographers typically think that's going to be the best time to produce a photo. They're actually taken kind of in the middle of the day. And the reason for that is, yes, there's lots of hard shadows. I don't think that the lighting does this entryway really any justice. But you also get these really nice blue skies that you're not going to get in the morning and you're not going to get late in the afternoon. And if you're trying to sell vacations or travel, the blue skies and the hot, warm weather is kind of a time of day where a lot of people actually would see this image and say, wow, like that is Puerto Rico. That's the type of lifestyle I want to live in. Whereas if I go to an image that I think I might have liked a little bit better, say this one here, I think the lighting is a little nicer here, but you can see the skies aren't as dramatic, and I don't know, there's something about this image that pops a little bit more, and I know for me, I probably would ignore shooting at this time of day. So I think that's really interesting to go through the same location throughout different times of day and be able to see, you know, just how different they are. And then the final image that I have, this is taken at 7:18 in the morning. This is our one sunrise shot where the sun is coming up from the right. And it's very easy to see that by kind of this highlight up here on this window, and you can tell everything's in shade here. So, you know, if we compare this image with the sunset image, you can see just how similar they are, but the lighting is coming from a completely different location. So now that we've taken some time to look at the images taken at the exact same location during different times of day, different weather patterns, let's now open these up and see if we can replace the skies in a way that looks compelling. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to be saying, hey, these images actually have pretty good skies. That's the beauty of living in a climate in the Caribbean, but I'm sure you're not always going to be quite as lucky. So let's come over here to edit. I'm not going to play around with trying to get the image perfect. I'm really just going to be focusing on the skies. So if I come down here to creative, there is something called sky and augmented sky. Now, augmented sky is if I wanted to add something into the sky. If I wanted to add, you know, some of these cool airplanes that are flying by. A lot of people in this neighborhood also use the paramotors, where you have the parachute and then the motor on your back. If I had an image like that and I wanted to add it into my sky, I would use augmented sky, but I'm just going to hit Sky AI. And for this, if we hit sky selection, you can see they've added a ton of new skies. And perhaps the best feature is they've added thumbnails, so you finally can see what the images look like. Before it was just text and it was really difficult to tell what you're dealing with. So the first thing that I want to do, I'm going to work backwards. This is a sunrise shot. So let's come up here And let's go to, I'm gonna go to sunset. Sunrise and sunset should look pretty identical except for the direction that the sun is setting or rising. Let's click on something like this image. And the first problem that we see is that our sun is not in the correct location. The sun was rising on the right-hand side of the frame, and it's casting this nice glow up here, and then it's sending kind of the foreground into a little bit of shade. So having an image where the sun is behind your subject, this doesn't make sense no matter how well I blend this in, because you would imagine all the shadows should be coming towards the camera. This highlight probably wouldn't be there. In fact, everything in this frame would be backlit and should be very dark, and then I should have nice highlights on all the trees and the mountains. So this image is not going to be a good contender. Let's go to another one. Let's do sunset 3. And I can already tell, I think the problem with some of the images that are going to be included in these sunsets are going to be where the camera is shooting towards the sunset. And that's definitely not the type of image that we want for this shot. This image has the exact same problem. We have the sun now setting behind our subject matter, and it's just not realistic. So what I'm going to do is I am going to insert my own image. I'm going to go to custom here, and I have a folder called skies. These are all high-res images from the sky replacement tutorial we did with Mike Kelly, where you get, I think, 200 high-res raw files of all different skies that Mike has used in his own architectural work. And I like this because I can find the exact type of sky that I'm looking for. Now, it might be hard to see on the screen, but I have many images where the sun is rising in the frame, just like these ones that are included with Luminar. But what I'm looking for is an image where the sun is setting or rising on either side of the horizon, but not in the middle of the frame. And I want it to be pretty soft. I don't think I want one of these super dramatic skies yet. We might get to that in a minute. Let's go with something like this. I'm going to go with this image. I'm going to hit open. And the first thing you're going to notice is that it has placed this image a little too high. So I'm going to come down to orientation, and let's go to vertical offset, and let's just pull that down. Now something like that looks pretty good. Now the obvious problem for the trained eye, and the reason this doesn't look very compelling, is that you can tell the left side of the clouds are lit and the right side of the clouds are dark, but in our frame, the right side of the houses over here and up here are all lit, but the left side of the houses are dark. So what Luminar has finally done is they have added a flip button. Thank goodness. We can now flip this, and now our lighting should match the same time of day. Now I do have a problem over here. I have a building that's magically appearing. With the horizontal offset, let's just move that over just a little bit. And now that we've flipped it, this looks a lot more realistic. We have the sun rising on the right. We have these nice highlights here in the mountains. We have these nice highlights here on top of the building. And our clouds now have the same highlight on the right-hand side. So I would probably come down here to scene relighting, and I would pull the slider to the left so that the foreground gets a little bit brighter. And then if I come down here to sky adjustments, I probably want to brighten up my sky just a touch too. It feels a little dark and dreary. And something like that looks pretty good. So if I turn this on and off, you can see what we've done here. And again, I don't know that this is the right sky. I just want to show why it's so important to take into account the time of day and the lighting direction when doing these images. Let's go to another image here. Let's go to this one that's super dreary where the storm clouds are coming in. And let me show you just how ridiculous the wrong sky can make in an image like this. Let's come here to bright blue sky. Let's just choose one of these. And now this one's a little more difficult because we don't have the dramatic sun on either side of the frame. It might be a little harder to understand why this one doesn't work. But if I look closely, the sun is directly above these clouds. It's casting a nice highlight on the top of the clouds and then a shadow on the bottom of the clouds. And because this would be kind of a partially cloudy sky, you would also expect here in the foreground on the land, you would expect there to be little hot patches of areas where the sun is directly hitting the landscape, and then shaded areas where the cloud cover is producing shade. But in an image like this doesn't feel very natural because the entire background is all shaded. So I don't think an image like this would work. Let's go down to dramatic sky. Let's see what this does. And again, you would think that this might make sense because hey, this is a crazy cloud formation, and here we are shooting in kind of a rainy environment. But again, if you really look at it, you have these nice God rays. This is a really cool sky that would definitely be useful for something, but it's backlighting the scene, and then it should be casting all of these nice highlights kind of right here behind the building. Maybe it's a little compelling because, you know, the highlighted area is hidden by this building, but I don't think that this is gonna work either. So let me see if I can add a custom image of my own here. That's super dramatic. And I want it to be pretty overcast. I don't want it to have a lot of light coming through the clouds. I mean, so we could go really extreme, something like this. This sky is, I don't know if a hurricane was hitting when Mike took this image, but this definitely seems to fit a little bit better. It's still a little over the top, but maybe we can blend this in just a little bit better. And depending on what type of photography you're doing, I don't know that your client wants to sell this sort of vibe, but again, all we're focusing on is trying to match the correct sky with the pre-existing conditions in your landscape photo. Now with the vertical offset, if I pull this all the way to the left, it is going to bring my sky down in the frame, and that doesn't really look super realistic because all of the sky looks just compressed right on our scene. If we move it all the way to the right, it's going to raise our background frame, and it looks like this image was shot right along the water line, so that's not going to work either. So we probably want to just play with this a little bit to find the perfect location for this sky. And in an ideal world, we would actually line up the horizon of the sky replacement with the horizon of the scene that we're shooting. The closer that you can get that, the more realistic it's going to look, so that you don't have skies that are way up in the atmosphere pulled really down low onto the horizon. I still don't know that this totally is my favorite shot. I mean, this looks kind of crazy. Let's jump to an image that might make a little bit more sense. Let's go to one of these images here that have the hard light from above, and let's see what we can do. Let's go to sky selection, and maybe bright blue sky would work well here because we're in the middle of the day. Let's try this first one, and that looks pretty good right out of the gate without doing any adjustments whatsoever. Let me turn this on and off. It's funny, by changing the sky, this almost changes the image from being like in the tropics to now being in like Arizona or something. I don't think these type of clouds happen quite as often down here in Puerto Rico. That may be something that you would only know if you lived in an area long enough, but I feel like this doesn't totally work in an accurate way simply because I know these clouds don't happen as often here. But from the normal viewer, I don't know that, you know, from a time standpoint or from a light direction standpoint, I think this actually could work pretty well. Let's try this image. I know we've already used this one before, but this is a great example of, if you look at the natural clouds in the sky here, they have this shadow on the bottom and they have the highlight on top. And if I turn the sky on from Luminar AI, it has the exact sort of same setting. It has the highlight from the top, and then the bottoms are also shaded. So if I, you know, mix these up, it would be very hard to tell you which one of these was the original because they match so closely. In fact, the sky that we have here in this image almost is good enough. Like, I don't know that I would really replace the sky because it is a pretty interesting sky to begin with, but I think that's a great example for using something that's in the middle of the day. Now, for the final image, let's go to perhaps my favorite photo, which is the very first image I ever took. This was the one I took about a month ago. And I love the warmth of the background. You know, maybe I could blend in another exposure or try to pull down the highlights so that these buildings aren't quite as bright as they are. But I think this looks killer for this particular home. I really love the lighting event here. It's so inviting. You just want to walk down the patio and go straight into the home. I guess ideally, if I was working with this home, you'd open that door and have it to where your eye just goes straight into kind of the foyer or living room, whatever is right behind that door. But let's say that this sky really isn't as dramatic as you want. I don't think that this sky looks particularly interesting. Let's come up here to sky selection, I've accidentally hit download more, but that brings you to the Luminar marketplace. If you want to download more skies from a bunch of different photographers, you can do that as well here. But let's go back, and instead of downloading more, we want to load our own custom sky, because we remember this is a sunset, and the sunset images that are included have the sun in the frame, and we do not want that. If I go to show custom skies, this is kind of cool. It's automatically loading the skies that I have personally imported into Luminar, and it's keeping track of them. So if there's a sky that you use over and over again, this is kind of a shortcut to get back to the skies that you've already used. You could literally load this up with hundreds of different skies. So instead, I'm going to go to all skies. You can see everything right here that are not categorized now. And the 2 skies that I've loaded, they're also showing up in here, which is great. I'm going to hit the plus button. I'm going to come back to my sky library, Mike Kelly's sky library, and let's find an image that really looks nice. I like this one here. I'm not so concerned if the sun is setting on the left or the right, because we can use the flip feature to change that. I'm just wanting something that doesn't look too over the top, but still is a better sky than what we just had. Comparing the sky that I originally took with these skies from the sky library, I don't want something that is too vibrant. It doesn't appear that the sky would be, super magenta at this time of day. So I know a lot of you, it's very tempting to dive in and get the craziest looking sky and to move the sliders all to magenta and try to make it look really, really intense. But if you're trying to create a sky replacement that looks accurate, you really want to refrain from doing that. This image here looks kind of subtle. Let's see if this works. Now I believe from the thumbnail, the sun is setting to the right. And let's see if I move the horizontal offset over to the left, if I can bring in more of the interesting sky over on the right. And if we look at this image, we can tell it's much darker on the left than it is on the right, which is a telltale sign that the sun is setting to the right. So let's go ahead and flip this so we can get the sun setting on the left like it is in our original photo. And that looks really, really nice. Let me see if I can darken the sky a little bit. Let's come down here to sky adjustment. Let's bring the brightness down a little bit. I don't want it to be too dark, because obviously there's some hard sunlight hitting these houses in the background. And if we make the sky look too dark, then it's going to look a little unrealistic that there's this bright area in our frame. We could also add some warmth. This is a very warm time of day. Moving the slider to the right is going to increase warmth. Moving it to the left is going to make it a little cooler. Now, if you were to shoot an image, say at 2.8 with a very shallow depth of field, you would imagine that the background, say the mountains and the sky, would be much blurrier. You could also use this defocus. This isn't really something I've talked about in this video, but you want the depth of field to match as well. You want your focal length to match, you want your depth of field to match. So if you have a really blurry background, you would probably want to slide the defocus to the right so that you blur the sky a little bit more, so that you don't have a shallow depth of field but then a super sharp sky with a lot of detail in the clouds. For this image, I'm shooting at f8 and I'm shooting fairly wide. Everything is in focus. I'm going to leave the defocus to the far left so that my sky is nice and sharp, just like the rest of my frame. While I'm also talking about that, you wouldn't want to use a telephoto shot of a sky. A lot of people might take a 70 to 200, you zoom into 200, you get a shot of just the sky, and it's like one awesome cloud formation. And then you take that image and you throw it into a 30mm shot. You might not know why it doesn't look real, but subconsciously your mind knows that that looks like a telephoto shot in the sky, but the scene is shot at a wider angle. So you want to try to match up your lens's focal length as well when you're trying to do these sky replacements. Luminar has also added this slider atmospheric haze, and if you watch some of their videos, you can see that it can add this kind of smoke or cloud cover that's in some really dramatic landscapes. It's pretty cool. If we use it in this image and I just slide it all the way over, you can see what it does. It kind of adds a little bit of haze to the whole sky and gets rid of some of the detail. It's almost adding a white point to it. I think this looks pretty good. Now this is way too far to the right here. We're almost blowing out our sky. But to the far left, with no haze, I almost think my sky looks slightly fake. So maybe I want to just blend in a little bit of haze, just so my sky doesn't look like it's been dropped in perfectly. And another slider they have here is Relight Human. Now, if I had a person in the frame, say this wasn't a real estate shot, but this was a portrait of a real estate agent, and I had somebody right here on the front porch, I could use the Relight Human to either decrease the exposure just on their face or increase the exposure on their face and body, depending on the lighting that I threw in with the sky replacement. So this is really handy, especially maybe you're a wedding photographer and you're shooting a lot of pictures of the bride and groom against the sky and they're being cut out by the software. You might find that you need to relight the human, and their AI technology now can detect the human face and the human body and actually change the exposure on the people separate from the lighting on the environment, which is really, really cool. And then we can also change relight saturation. Let me bump this all the way up just to show you what this does. And it's kind of hard to tell in this image, but relight saturation this is all changing the scenery. So this is bumping up the saturation on the foreground. And the idea is that it can help you match the colors from the sky a little bit better. So if you have a very monochromatic sky that's very dramatic but no color, you might want to desaturate your foreground. If you have a very vibrant sunset, you might want to increase the saturation so that those match as well. Now, unfortunately, this shot doesn't have a body of water right near it, but the final feature that Luminar 1.2 has added is reflection. And what you can do with this is you can add more or less reflection of the sky that you're throwing into your image into the reflection of the water. So if this had like a lake, or say the ocean, it's right over here to the right, if the ocean was a big part of this scene, I could increase or decrease the amount of the sky being reflected into the water, which is one more thing that would make this look a lot more compelling. What you definitely don't want in a sky replacement is the body of water to be reflecting a different sky than the sky that's in your sky replacement, or even reflecting a different color. So if your sky was very magenta, you wouldn't want the water to be perfectly blue, because in theory, it should be reflecting the sky above it. So they have added the reflection amount, which is a very, very handy feature too. So I'm really impressed where Luminar has gone just in the has it even been a year? I think this software's only been out for like 4 or 5 months. I'm really impressed with the user interface. The fact that you can now see all of these skies in thumbnails is huge. You don't have to guess at what sky you're using. And then the fact that you can add your own custom skies that are also part of this user interface, I think is a very, very nice upgrade. And I know it seems kind of silly and small, but having this flip feature, I mean, that was a feature I wanted a long time ago, when you have the perfect sky, but you just want to flip it so that the sun is setting on the opposite side. That is definitely going to help you with your sky replacement. So there you go. These are a few of my techniques that I use when I do sky replacements, and I hope that it at least kind of reconfirms the things you've been doing with your own photography, or if it's something you haven't really thought about, it's getting the gears to turn just a little bit so that your work looks as believable as possible when you're forced to produce a perfect image, even when the conditions aren't quite as perfect as you would have liked. If you enjoyed this type of content, head over to fstoppers.com, where we feature free articles every single day. If you want to learn from some of the best photographers in the world, head over to fstoppers.com/store, where you can check out our full, super in-depth tutorials by some of the best photographers out there. And if you want to get your own copy of Luminar AI, head to the link in the description below or the pinned comment below. You can download this and try it out on your own. So hope you guys enjoy this. See you soon.